And without further ado, I will give the floor to Teresa, who will introduce herself.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me without the mic? Is it okay if I don't use it?
Yes.
And the sound guy is not worried about it either? Hopefully not. Okay, so my name is Teresa Hadravova. I'm coming from Prague, from Charles University. We have a department of aesthetics there, so I teach there. I don't know if there are any aesthetic departments in Latvia. They are pretty rare, I think. Austro-Hungarian region basically has them, so Slovakia, Hungary, a bit of them are important too. Anyway, I'm not a trained film theorist. It was hybris to put that on the plate. But I teach film theory at my department, so I happen to do a lot of readings along with my students. And today I'm going to talk about someone who I'm greatly interested in. Her name is Susan K. Langer. She's a philosopher. I will introduce you in due course. She wrote a very short piece on film. She was in no way a film theorist herself. And I'm gonna to discuss this little piece with you, or to introduce it and see what you think about it. But let me just start with reading the paper, because I was worried that I would be so nervous that I wouldn't be able to speak coherently for 90 minutes. The paper lasts about like 60 minutes. I tried it in the morning, and we have 90 minutes together. So you may interrupt me, you may ask questions. I will try to ask some questions too, just to see whether you're still with me. I'm not gonna to ask any difficult questions, just like what you think, or if there's anything you find weird or interesting in any way. And let me start with the very first question right now. Is there anyone in this room who has never dreamed? So we all share the experience of dreaming, right? So I can safely say in this auditorium that we all have dreams. However, do we truly understand what dreams are? Dreaming, although quite intimately known to most of us, remains not only an elusive experience, but also a slippery concept. Norman Malcolm, a Wittgensteinian scholar, raised doubts over the very concept of dreaming in his 1959 book called Dreaming. He said, "Where does the concept of dreaming come from? We are strongly inclined to think of dreaming as an inward state or process of the soul, and to suppose that each of us arrives at the concept of dreaming through taking note of the process in himself. But this idea gives rise to insoluble problems. For one thing, how could it be determined that the inner state of different people were the same, and therefore that they meant the same thing by the word dreaming? Even more serious, how could one know that the inner state one calls dreaming is the same in oneself each time? Perhaps there is not enough regularity in one's application of the sound dreaming for it to even qualify as a word. An appeal to one's memory impression of its being the same state each time would be useless, because there would be no possibility of one's determining whether this impression was true or false." So we may kind of detect Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations in this line of thought. So although the whole book seems to be quite devastating to the concept of dreaming, it's still basically used as a normal currency. But there are others who doubt about its firmness or existence. For Daniel C. Dennett, writing about 20 years later, It is an open, that's a quote, an open and theoretical question whether dreams fall inside or outside the boundary of experience. He suggests that before we understand the concept of experience correctly, quote, it is still a possibility that dreams are not what we took them to be. Then it even considers as the possibility, quote, that it turns out that there are not dreams after all, only dream recollections. And that's also basically the conclusion that Malcolm reaches in his book, saying that what dreams are is derived from, not from the dream experience per se, but from the recollection of dream experience. And finally, a few years ago, Eric Schwitzgebel explored our ideas about dreams, both conceptually and empirically, reviewing available studies as well as running his own experimental research in different parts of the world. Despite this rigorous approach, or rather thanks to it, he finds that we are profoundly ignorant of our dreams. In his study titled Recoloring the Dream World, which I will explore in more detail later, he suggests that while we may never understand what dreams truly are, our reports of dreams may be strongly influenced by shared, that's a quote, cultural attitude or the availability of certain metaphors or certain ways of thinking and talking about one's dream life. So again, the consensus about dreams is not based on the dream experience itself, but rather on a shared conception of the dream report. So take these three philosophical skeptics regarding the knowability of dreaming, Norman Malcolm, Daniel Dennett, and Eric Schwitzgebel, as a prelude to my talk that focuses on the film, although understood through dreams. While preparing for this talk, I discovered that the metaphor is also often used in the reversed order. Not only are films compared to dreams, but dreams are also often compared to films. Yeah. So you can find psychologists claiming, and that's the left side of the screen, dreams are a form, probably the most primitive form of ideation, in which experiences and situations of the day and of life are reproduced on the screen of the mind during sleep as images, usually in visual form. Or another one saying dreams are like old silent films without sound and technicolor. I'm not sure if you would subscribe to this view, but it was, as you will learn, pretty common in the 60s, in early 60s. On the other hand, we have film theoreticians or practitioners thinking about what films are deep down and comparing them to films. Fellini famously says, talking about dreams is like talking about movies, since the cinema uses the language of dreams. Years can pass in a second and you can hop from one place to another. It's a language made of image. And in the real cinema, every object and every light means something, as in dream. And then Barbara Creed, who says, dreaming and viewing both take place in the dark. The subject is not in control of the flow of images, which in both contexts seem to originate from a point outside the conscious control of the individual. The darkness of the auditorium closed out distracting images from the real world, while the music shut out any sounds. The dream state was further intensified by the way that the images unfolded, not in accordance with rules of logic, but in terms of their own logic. So the metaphor or the analogy between film and dream is bidirectional. Target and source of the metaphor can be switched. It does not necessarily mean, though, that their meaning is kept the same throughout throughout the swap. Proposing to understand film as dream may seek to elucidate different aspects that film and dream supposedly share than when one enters the analogy from the opposite side. And you can clearly see it here, although I chose the quotes so to make this visible, so you may certainly discover some exceptions. So when the analogy is used by Fellini, whose target is film and as a source, whose target is film and the source is the dream, the emphasis is on creative imagination and freedom of expression. In film, you can hop from one place to another, years can pass in a second, just like in dreams. Similarly, Barbara Creed speaks of cinematic images unfolding in accordance with their own logic, just like dreams. On the other hand, the psychologists who compare films to dreams emphasize rather their merely reproductive character. Dreams reproduce situations of the day and of life just like films. And the limits of the medium, so they emphasize reproductive character and the limits of the medium, so to speak. So the other psychologist says dreams are supposedly black and white and silent, just like early cinema. So the choice between the two competing metaphors, dreams understood through films or films understood through dreams, likely depends on what we are more intrigued by, the nature of cinema or the nature of dream. Although in this lecture I will work primarily with the text that uses dream analogy to shed light on cinema, I aim to pay equal attention to the latter perspective, exploring what films reveal or seem to reveal of our dreams. So in this lecture, I will interpret a short and relatively unknown essay written by an American philosopher, Susan K. Langer. Okay, let me just hop to this slide. Susan K. Langer on the nature of film. I wonder, is there anyone who's familiar with Susan K. Langer here? It's like nothing to be ashamed of. When I talk to philosophers or to people at specialist conferences, there's always like one or two people, usually older ones, who are familiar with her because of her book Philosophy in a New Key, which was published in 1942 and became a bestseller. So especially in the US, you can still find it in every second-hand shop, or there were just thousands of copies out there. 500,000 of copies was sold, I think. So it's one of the book that everybody used to have, everybody studying the humanities. In spite of that, she is relatively unknown. One thing that is usually said about her that's something really striking is that she's the first professional female philosopher in the US. She had an excellent mind. She was very devoted to philosophy, and she basically started, the very first book that she published, The Practice of Philosophy, published in 1930, was already something that was really much discussed by, at that time, analytic philosophy circles in Europe, and she ended up writing with her very last book, Mind, an essay on human feeling. The last volume of it was published in 1982. So she really worked very intensively and in a very focused manner throughout her whole life. In spite of this rigorous approach to philosophy, she gained the stable position as a professor in her late 50s, and retired soon afterwards. So she was kind of traveling across the US, teaching 2 years here and 2 years there. She is an American philosopher born in New York City, but she was born to German parents, and she spoke German as it was her mother tongue in early childhood. And her work is thus kind of she's unusually, for an American philosopher, well versed in post-Kantian philosophy. She was the first translator of Ernst Cassirer into English, and she befriended Ernst Cassirer and was strongly influenced by him. Another influence was Alfred North Whitehead, another Wittgenstein. Whitehead was her teacher at Radcliffe College, which was affiliated to Harvard. So anyway, that's just a very kind of short introduction to Susan Langer. We don't need to know much about her, but I'm happy to talk about her if you ask me any questions. She's really somebody I'm really interested in. But we are going to talk about as I said, the very short text that is published as a part of Feeling and Form book. It's actually an appendix, so it's only, so she writes like 50 pages about each art form that she selects in the book, and that at the very end, that there's this few pages devoted to film. It hasn't been discussed much in film theory, at least as far as I know, which means mostly in English-speaking sources. But it was recently republished in an anthology, Philosophy of Film and Motion Pictures, edited by Noel Carroll and Ginny Choi. So I think it might get a little bit more popular in a way, although it's published as a kind of a historical text. And there are a few authors who actually wrote something about the Node. There was one book, A New Node on the Film, which was written by Tracy Curran. It was a dissertation then published, and then a handful of articles. Okay, so let me just get back. So within the essay titled Note on Film, written in 1953 and included in her seminal book Feeling and Form, Langer draws a comparison between cinema and the dream. It is important to note that this analogy between film and dream is not about specific films that may possess a dreamlike ambience or be composed entirely or partly of dream sequences such as 8½, by Federico Fellini, or Waking Life by Richard Linklater. Instead, Langer's theory concerns the intrinsic nature of film itself. It would nevertheless be a missed opportunity not to mention any specific films, particularly those that explicitly engage with dreaming in this occasion. More importantly, if Langer's assertion holds true, then films that incorporate dreams become as much about the realm of dreams as they are about the medium of cinema itself. Hence, throughout the lecture, I will occasionally make references to the films of the Czech director and a member of the Surrealist group Jan Švankmajer, whose lifelong body of work is deeply rooted in the exploration of dreams. Although Langer's essay in question is brief, spanning only 5 pages and explicitly preliminary, a close reading allows for the structured delineation of the analogy along various axes Consequently, I will divide the lecture into several, 4 in fact, thematic chapters, each introduced by a pertinent quote from Langer's essay and a clip from one of Jan Schwankmayer's films. Through this systematic approach, I aim to unpack Langer's metaphor as it pertains to films. Furthermore, I will inquire whether, and to what extent, films also shed light on the essence of dreams themselves. Okay. So the chapter 1 is Films and Dreams Are Omnivorous. I don't know, maybe, is there any seat free inside? No. Oh, sorry, yeah, you can bring the chair. So in her note, Langer speaks of the films and dreams' intensive appetite. To illustrate this concept, let us begin with Jan Schwankmayer's short film Jídlo, Food, from 1992. In this stop-motion animation, the characters exhibit not only an omnivorous appetite, but also teeter on the ambivalent borderline between the natural and the unnatural, the real and the unreal, the human and the machine. The film is divided into three parts, each illuminating a different aspect of consumption. The first chapter, titled Breakfast, emphasizes and mocks the eternal circularity of eating, while the third chapter, Dinner, explores the darkest and most perverse corners of eating for pleasure. The second part, Lunch, which we are about to see, focuses on the imaginative redescription of reality under the sway of strong desires, such as hunger. It explores the insatiability of the human pursuit of satisfying one's need, pursuit that cannot be stopped by either physical or moral obstacles. For our purposes, it serves as an illustration of the concept of the omnivorous that I will introduce after the clip finishes. That was Jan Schwankmajer. Are you familiar with his work? I thought so. But it's always nice to see a bit of Schwankmajer. But this was probably the longest clip we have seen. Okay, so let me now quote the promised extract from Langer. So one of the most striking characteristics of this new art is that it seems to be omnivorous, able to assimilate the most diverse materials and turn them into elements of its own. With every new invention, montage, the soundtrack, Technicolor, its devotees have raised a cry of fear that now its art must be lost. Since every such novelty is of course promptly exploited before it is even technically perfected and flaunted in its rawest state as a popular sensation in the flood of meaningless compositions that steadily supplies the show business, there is usually a tidal wave of particularly bad rubbish in association with every important advance. But the art goes on. It swallows everything: dancing, skating, drama, panorama, cartooning, music. So in this passage, Langer observes the remarkable assimilative power of films, their ability to seamlessly incorporate any new technological innovation, make it a part and parcel of their own bodies, so to speak. This often surpasses the expectations of those who have already acknowledged the film's artistic status. However, in doing so, they have frequently frozen into one of its particular, previously attained forms, regarding it solely through the lens of its past. She juxtaposes these conservative inclinations of film as art gatekeepers with those who eagerly embrace each technical novelty because they regard it as a means to capitalize on profit. Ultimately, Langer suggests that the latter perspective proves correct, not because of the opportunities for exploitation that new technologies offer to business-minded people, but rather due to the inherently inclusive nature of film itself. As she succinctly states, the film swallows everything, similarly to those two characters we watched in the movie clip. This passage precedes Langer's assertion that film is akin to the dream, yet I believe that the metaphor is already at play here. Dreams, much like films, seem to be omnivorous, capable of assimilating and adapting any sensation or idea that crosses one's mind, even those that fall beyond the threshold of conscious experience during waking life. It was what Daniel Dennett calls the received view, according to which sense perception, as well as emotions, desires, or ideas, supply the mind with material that persists within it after their internal and external cause has dissipated. Aristotle, one of the proponents of this view, imagines this material as movements akin to little eddies, like rills, forming in rivers, continuously swirling within the mind. While a person sleeps, these movements are set free and begin to circulate in the blood, supplying the dreamer's mind with images and other sensory content broken into other forms by collisions. So that's Aristotle's description of dreaming. The image of an eddy set free in the stream of the dreamer's mind aligns with how Langer conceives of the function of the dream in her other writings. According to her, dreaming constitutes a fundamental mode of understanding, one that likely predates conscious thought in human evolution. It enables individuals to complete acts initiated during waking life within the mind, thereby alleviating a pressure to directly act in reality, the pressure to which animals are subject. The parallel between the omnivorous nature of films, as described in this passage quoted at the beginning, and that of dreams can be further extended, albeit potentially beyond what Langer herself might propose. So consider the list of items the film has swallowed, according to Langer: dancing, skating, drama, panorama, cartooning, music. These elements represent distinct modes of expression, different media. Langer thus underscores that the genesis and evolution of film, perhaps more prominently than other art forms, involve the crossing of various media, indicating that film is inherently intermedial. But what about dreams? Do they also not only incorporate specific contents of experience, but also their forms? Do films evolve through these encounters? This may seem to be a strange, far-fetched idea, but it has been entertained by some researchers in the past years. Eric Schwitzgebel, who I have already mentioned, collected descriptions of dreams from philosophical literature and other sources, psychologists, neuroscientists, as well as the result of dream research, as well as the results of dream research conducted by psychologists from the early 20th century on. He particularly focused on the occurrence of colors in dream. And his findings are quite remarkable. Schwitzgebel found out that throughout the period from the 30s to the 60s, more than half of the subjects reported that their dreams were in black and white. However, before this period, that is until the 30s, more or less, and after this period, that is in the second half of the 60s and on, people reported dreaming in color. Hence the title of his essay, Recoloring the Dream World. How is such a recoloring possible? The table that I took a picture of is just kind of documenting the way he researched that, and in that column, percentage of people reporting color dreams, you can see that there's a drop in percent in 53, 51, whereas in 62 and 63 it already goes up again from 9% to 94%. I mean, of course, the research was done in different ways and different methodologies, so you can't take it at face value. But generally, there is some kind of trend that is quite difficult to ignore, and he also did research in American journals or magazines like Time or New Yorker, and also found out that the metaphors used there when people spoke about dreams in the 50s, early 60s were sometimes emphasizing the black and white character of dreams. So it seemed...
Yeah, so what would be the difference between reporting color dreams and dreams that contain color?
Yeah, well, it always depends on the, so some people didn't really ask, are you dreaming in color? So, they might have asked, was there any color in your dream? And there is quite a difference in these two questions, because sometimes, when you ask about color specifically, like, is there any color, you're kind of forwarding that, or, in my dreams, anyway, we may discuss our dreams after that, but let's just see what his explanation is. Actually, it's not his explanation, it's one explanation that he considers and rejects later on. But I will just use that as basically the end of it. As I said, we can discuss it later. So one possible explanation of all this is that a ubiquity of black and white images in film media changes people's dreams. So although Aristotle, Epicurus, Freud and their contemporaries dreamed in color, the average American in the 50s dreamed mostly in black and white. And now that color media again dominate, our dreams are returning to color. On this explanation, dreams simply assimilate the dominant medium of the time. In the past, dreams were often likened to paintings and tapestries. And the interesting question would be, if we subscribe to this explanation, like, did dreams move back then? Nobody ran a research on that in the 19th century. So. When cinema was invented, dreams gradually swallowed it too. The movement gained through this alignment was exchanged for color, which had been lost until it too became a common feature of cinema in the 60s, and consequently of dreams as well. Although this interpretation may feel questionable, and we can later discuss what makes it so, let us consider the following lesson. The dream, much like the film, is perhaps more changeable and evolving than one would expect, capable of assimilating everything it encounters and inherently embodying a multimedia nature. And let us now proceed to the second chapter. Dreams and films are immediate. To introduce the next passage, let us watch the first minutes of Schwankmayer's feature film, Lunacy. In this scene, the main character is experiencing a nightmare. And we later discover this particular dream occurs whenever he encounters something that disrupts the routine of daily life. The dream casts its shadow over the supposed reality depicted in the movie. Not only is the reality roughly out of the ordinary, but it also feels staged for the sake of the main character, as if he were continually dreaming and, although unintentionally, responsible for the distorted and horrific events that unfold.
Okamžite! Slyšíte? Okamžitě otevřte! Ano. Probuďte se!
So let us now turn to Langer. Shortly after the passage quoted above, Langer claims that the film is like the dream. She writes like in inverted commas to emphasize that she does not mean that cinema copies dreams or induces daydreaming. What film shares with dreams, according to Langer, is the form of experience. Here's what she says. Cinema is like dream in the mode of its presentation. It creates a virtual present, an order of direct apparition. That is the mode of dream. The most noteworthy formal characteristic of dream is that the dreamer is always at the center of it. Places shift, persons act and speak, or change or fade. Facts emerge, situations grow. Objects come into view with strange importance, ordinary things infinitely valuable and horrible, and they may be superseded by others that are related to them essentially by feeling, not by natural proximity. But the dreamer is always there. His relation is, so to speak, equidistant from all events. Things may occur around him or unroll before his eyes. He may act or want to act or suffer or contemplate, but the immediacy of everything in a dream is the same for him. This is a difficult passage to interpret. The analogy between dreams and films, as Langer describes it here, is rooted in perception. She seems to be saying that the dream perception is specific, different from the one that occurs in waking context. To describe its specificity, Langer calls it immediate. This raises an intriguing question about the nature of perception in our everyday waking lives. Is our normal perception not immediate? In the history of philosophy, perception has often been considered a paradigmatic example of immediacy, although this view has been challenged by many as well. The nature of perception is too complex a topic to be explored here. It is worth mentioning that Langer is among those who challenge the traditional view that sense perception is immediate, as advocated by empiricists or positivists. And if she calls perception in dreams immediate, she doesn't necessarily suggest that it is immediate in the same sense as defenders of immediacy would argue for daily perception. Notice that in the passage she refers to objects and events rather than some precognitive sensory material. Moreover, these perceived objects are imbued with subjective values. They are described as important, valuable, horrible, even infinitely so. This indicates that they are already perceived as, seen under a specific particular aspect, filtered or mediated, if you will, by a particular perspective. So, what does the immediacy of perception in dreams consist of? Langer claims that the dreamer is always at the center, always there. She suggests a collapse of the typical separation between subject and object in perception. In dreams, and by analogy in films, the perceived reality is constantly shaped and colored by the presence of the perceiver. This means that the perceived reality reflects and mirrors the dreamer's own image. So this is how Langer later describes the perception of film in analogy with the explored sense of immediacy experienced in dreams. In films, Langer asserts that the mind is pervasively present. The viewed reality, she continues, seems one's own creation. This also suggests a collapse between the viewer and the viewed. The film reality is unrealistic all the time, not necessarily because it loses its resemblance to our daily world, but because the viewer feels to be entangled in it, as if they themselves are creating the world. Let me just go immediately to the third chapter, and these two are going to be relatively short, so that there should be some space for discussion, if you like. So in 1971, Schwankmajer adapted Lewis Carroll's nonsensical poem Jabberwocky. The short film is divided into several subchapters or etudes, and the borderline is always indicated by a variation on the scene that we are about to watch. It's very short, I warn you. I selected it for the contrast it presents between the way we perceive space within a picture, painting, and the space within the film. The violence of experiencing an illusion of pictorial space being ruined in a film whose space is much more flexible, unstable, and fluent, nicely illustrates Langer's remarks, which will be quoted later. Perhaps if the lights can go off. So the cat destroys the cubes like 5 times during the short film, but I always was like, oh, shock. Okay. And here's Langer's remark. One of the aesthetic peculiarities of dream, which the moving picture takes over, is the nature of its space. Dream events are spatial, often intensely concerned with space, intervals, endless roads, bottomless canyons, things too high, too near, too far, but they are not oriented in any total space. The same is true of the moving picture and distinguishes it despite its visual character from plastic art. Its space comes and goes. The obsession with space that Langer identifies as typical of films is rooted in the film's deeply subjective nature. Space is not merely depicted in films offering itself for its reconstruction. It is presented as something inherently connected to us. It is not an allocentric space with objective, measurable characteristics. Rather, its properties depend on our own bodies, personal histories, and deeper than reason thoughts. It is never neutral, rather always too high, too near, feeling bottomless, endless. The subjectification of space that Langer thinks to be characteristic of film is accompanied by the subjectification of time, which moves us to the last chapter. So time is now, forever, in film. The oldest sample of Schwankmayer's filmography we are going to watch is his short film, etc., from 1967. There are 3 chapters in this film. We're gonna to watch 2 of them and note the beginning. I really like it. So the last part of the note, the last sample. The dreamed reality on the screen can move forward and backward because it is really an eternal and ubiquitous virtual present. The action of drama goes inexorably forward because it creates a future, a destiny. The dream mode is an endless now, says Langer. In the closing remarks of her note, Langer compares film to the other two modes of literary art that she distinguishes in her book, drama and novel. While the novel, or literary fiction in general, creates, according to her, a form of experience with a memory-like character, we understand events narrated in books as if they have already happened and somebody, the narrator, gave us her account of them. Drama is a mode that inherently creates a future orientation in our understanding of the story, as if the narrative inevitably moves towards a predetermined destiny. Film, according to Langer, is neither drama nor fiction. It's inherently set not in the past, neither nor in the future, but in the present moment. Unlike the novel or drama, cinematic time is exceptionally malleable, allowing for immediate shifts between flashbacks and flash-forwards, seamlessly redressing them as part of the ongoing present experience. This quality suggests that there are no fixed tenses in the language of film, a notion echoed in Schwankmayer's endlessly circulating cinematic experiments. Langer supports her idea of the film's endless now by highlighting the ease with which films move forward and backward in time. Another piece of evidence could be found in the film's potential for rewatching. Every film, in a way, circulates in Schwankmayer's loop, and we often watch them again and again. The pleasure of this experience may be linked to their characteristic feature. Films always seem to surpass our capacities, unfolding too quickly to grasp in one viewing. They make me, at least, insatiable. I want to watch them again and again because I always feel I have missed something. The potential meaningfulness of every detail in cinema, noted also by Federico Fellini in the quote above, may resonate with us, the dreamers. Although we cannot easily rewind our dreams, the feeling of missing something profoundly important is, by my lights, a common experience. This feeling is coupled with the ease with which dreams evaporate and the sense of their transformation or distortion when we try to retell them in the form of a narrative. Perhaps we should all stop making stories of our dreams and start making movies of them. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions or remarks, comments? ever.
So I talked with students. Students now dreams games, not movies.
That's what I kept wondering about. Like when my movies start shifting like this, over sorry, my dreams.
Swiping and
So, yeah, but it has never happened yet, as far as I remember.
so I think it's interesting
But
how it will change the landscape theory of dreams, because if the dreams are games, so we will talk not about films and dreams, but
Might
games.
happen, yeah. But it's still kind of insecure whether the change really pertains to dreams or to our reports of dreams. You know, if that's something that happens overnight is just, you know, retold by using the metaphor that is nearest at hand, that is somewhere that you can, you know, grasp it easily or with the most ease, and then you use it to retell it, or whether it really kind of penetrates the dream itself.
And also we have a problem that a lot of students wants to make dreams, but there are too many films like dream ones, so it's hard to say not to do film about dreams, but also it's I don't know, it's harder for festivals and so on. You need to make something nice from it. So I think it's also like problem too, not like only good stuff, but the problem of too much films. I don't know the statistic. Maybe who selects selections knows that, but.
Yeah, might be an easy way for them just to, you know, compose the story that is not really coherent, just like in my dream. A shortcut.
Question.
Yeah.
What drives you personally to investigate this topic?
To investigate what
The parallel between film and dreams.
So I think that I have already kind of showed my enthusiasm about Langer. So whatever Langer wrote, I just try to kind of put together and see it as relevant somehow to. And I don't think that her note on film is the best piece of writing, but still I find it kind of provocative. And whenever I discuss it with my students, it's always one of the best discussions in semester. In spite of, you know, its length and relative shallowness in many respects. So it's still a provocative kind of writing. So I'm more intrigued by Langer than by the metaphor itself. But as I said, when I started preparing the talk and thus started thinking more deeply about my own dreams and the way the parallel is used, it just became an interesting question for me, how we can think about dreams and whether thinking through films might perhaps be somehow more fitting to the dream world than other media. If the trouble we have, I know I think that's shared, isn't it? This sense of I just knew that a second ago. Whenever I try to express or to retell the dream, it's always like a falsification of the experience. Something like that's not right. I'm missing the right way to say that, and whenever I do it, I lose something. So, and I lose it anyway because the memory just doesn't last. So there's. And when I write it down, I've been doing that for a couple of months now, it's always, what I remember is that writing rather than that dream. Like, at least that's what happens to me. So I wonder whether if I, woke up and took a camera and shoot the dream, whether it would be kind of more palpably with me afterwards. That's rather a joke, might not be true, but still, this sense of evaporation, that's something very characteristic of dream. And it might have to do with language as an improper way to express the dream. That's basically the proposal I made.
Yeah, that was something that the use of language, maybe I don't know what you found in your investigations about the narrative element of dreams, because we tend to think like, oh, I had a dream and this happened and then that happened and that happened, and all things are maybe very unexpected, very surreal, but just like in surrealism, there is a narrative connection that follows a logic. And in my experience, also talking to friends about dreams, I have the impression that there is not necessarily a connection, like a thread that unites different images or impressions that we might have when we're having dreams. Maybe that's something that in the attempt to remember them, we try to make sense out of them.
Yeah, that's very much close to what Langer, or how Langer thinks about films as dreams. She also doesn't foreground the narrative as the necessary element of film. It's rather about what, like, the space is like, what the time is like, how, you know, the mixture is made. So even in spite of the fact that it's a literary art for her, I think by calling it something that is present, it has a lot of to do with really a picture that moves, you know, something that doesn't really necessarily, although there are narrative films, of course, but not necessarily, that wouldn't be an essential feature for her film. There was one.
Hello, I just wanted to ask, because we talked a lot about perception of time and space in a dreams and in film, and I wonder if something like trialectics of Lefebvre can be used maybe to analyze further these things.
Can you say it again? Sorry. What?
Henry Lefebvre and his
Uh-huh.
trialectics of space. So maybe this can be something that, because like in pure just an analysis, and what do you think about it?
I'm not familiar with that, sorry. So I can't really answer your question.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Do you know about maybe any other like scientific research or data, like how the dreams were changing throughout the centuries? Like they were used to be black and white, then some like colored ones. Maybe
So
there's some-
if something else happened to dreams.
like, for example, like films, there is data that the cuts in films become shorter and shorter, like the life fastens. So maybe the dreams really become faster in a way. Or any
Yeah.
other interesting information.
Well, you just heard that dreams supposedly become more akin to computer games. Schwitzgebel might be a good reference. I think he's still alive and he's still doing research, although he's not completely focused on dreams. He's rather completely he's focused on the subjective experience as such. He thinks that not only that we don't know our dreams, we don't even know what it is like to perceive the world, or, you know, like things that we take for granted are just not to be taken for granted. That's basically the common note of his research. But he ran interesting studies with his Chinese collaborators, using different people in different regions with different experience, different kind of exposure to media culture. It can be a good reference for you, but he's focused on color. But that essay that I was referring to, it's a wonderful essay, and it ends with kind of a subjective confession being made by the author, which is quite unusual in analytic circles. And he's saying that every night, like every morning when he wakes up, he always asks himself, was it in color? And he never knows.
May I ask one question, your personal one maybe, but did you ever dream in animation?
I don't think so. I had one dream which was related to cinema. Yeah. So let me, and I wonder if you ever dreamed of cinema, about cinema. So I was in a conversation with a friend of mine, just that superficial kind of conversation, updates about our lives. And then, like, at the corner of the room, that was a dark room, he was standing there in one corner, and at the other corner, there was my son sitting in front of a screen. And I remember I felt worried, like, I always feel worried when the kids are around. So I felt normally worried, always a little bit more, because he seemed strangely fixed. Like he was really, like, too much fixed for him. Like he's always moving, and suddenly he stopped moving. And so I was like, what he's watching there? And I asked my friend, and she was like, that's a new technology, it's okay. So my kids love it too. And I realized that he was watching some kind of a horror movie. He's 9 years old, so he never watched horror. We watched some Schwankmayer's movie, but not the horror. But not only that, it was the horror movie. It was so the victim, or somebody afraid in the movie, had his face. And so Magda, the friend of mine, explained to me that it's that new technology that takes your face and it puts it on the screen, and you watch the film about yourself. I have never heard of it. I think it's technically possible, isn't it? I never heard. I don't think I've ever read about it. It's just the idea I had in my dream. Pretty scary one though. So.
You can sell it.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead with it.
I have one question. I don't know, have you watched Christopher Borgli movie Dream Scenario?
No.
This is a movie that the dreams can be used in commercial ways.
Mm-hmm.
That you put a hypnotherapy, like we're right now watching commercials on the TV, that using some high-tech technologies, we will translate some kind of commercial advertisement in people's mind, or even will manipulate with their minds to do some things.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, like to kill or be afraid of someone else. And yes, what are your thoughts about the dreams in the future? That someone using some techniques, some voices, and so on, can use our dreams in maybe bad situation. Do you believe in it?
I think this is something that is definitely, being researched, not by researchers or by commercially minded people. I read about it, a few articles, and it seems to be possible, that in one way or other. I mean, this idea of manipulation of dreams, sometimes self-induced, was here for a long time, and it can be abused, definitely.
I read some articles that there are some sounds you can hear people below 30, so yes, because they ear can hear some specific sound, and it is used in some countries, for example.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. It sounds too much like a conspiracy theory.
But yeah, it would be really nice if you watch this dream scenario. It is quite new movie.
Yeah, I will definitely watch it. I think it's based in certain way in reality. That there certainly is research on how to, by some chemo inducers, manipulate with the dreams for commercial purposes. One article I read about it wasn't a scientific article, but read a commentary. I think it was on Eon magazine, and an interesting thing. And it was done by it was written by a scientist who runs a lab where they try this manipulation. And he said that what he finds. So first of all, that their team was contacted by commercial companies. They rejected the collaboration, but it was a hot thing for them. And but also what he found striking is that people were not that much worried about it. But they ran some study like asking people, okay, would it be fine with you if somebody gave you some information during your sleep? And people, yeah, if I was paid for it or something like that, you know, as we are paid for watching commercials on TV, right? We don't pay it because a commercial company pays for that, yeah. And we just, you know, so it's okay, I can watch it, I can just, you know, cancel that from my consciousness somehow. Probably not.
So when this idea of connecting dreams with film started in academia, I mean, like, because I assume it wasn't from the very beginning. If we look Linear Brothers, it's more, the film was perceived as a reportage. I guess it very early it wasn't.
Yeah, but you have Méliès, right?
Yeah.
So it's always like, you know, so you have some kind of a documentary-like cinema also question whether that was really the purpose. And then you have this dream-like kind of images. But in theory, Langer wasn't the first one, that's for sure. But you caught me, I forgot. I knew the name, I don't know it anymore. There was one, at least as far as I know, there was one person who related dreams to, and Langer herself, she quotes someone, I don't remember his name either. So it was somehow discussed before the 50s, for sure.
But
Yeah.
I mean, generally, it started very early to be compared. That's
I would say so, yeah. Yeah, but again, I haven't done the proper research to give you a good answer. But thank you for the question. Any dreams you would like to share? What are dreams like for you? Are they cinematic?
an amazing experience of dreaming in the cinema, about the cinema. And then what was the film and what was the dream. But it was even more extraordinary because that was the film A Long Journey into the Night by Van Beek, I think. And when I woke up during the film, the first thing I saw was the main character walking up in the cinema.
Okay. So that really sounds like Schwankmajer waking up into another dream. Never sure whether you're in reality already or not.
But I guess that I mean, if you think of history of cinema, and which is also a history of how we perceive cinema, so how we produce and how we perceive it. But from the side of production, the very early cinema, the films of Méliès, they evoke this magical world combined with entertainment, and that already, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I can imagine that back then, in those days, it probably felt so real and at the same time magical that it could be compared to dreams.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, I think that it's about time. So thank you for your attention, really. And thanks the organizers for having invited me. I forgot to say that.